Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our third Lunch and Learn. And today we have the distinct pleasure of collaborating with the IPO, that's the Intellectual Property Office. And first we have Kaveh Sital. I want to thank you so much for being a part of the Film Friendly Network. And today our facilitators will be Ms. Steffi Mohammed and Ms. Anelia Baiju. Now for the bios, so please listen in so you'll know the quality, the standard that you have in front of you. Ms. Steffi Mohammed holds the position of Trademark System Specialist, Madrid, as a Senior Trademark Examiner in the Trademark Unit at the Intellectual Property Office, the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs. She is responsible for the examination of national trademark applications and Madrid applications or international trademark applications. Ms. Mohammed also is heavily involved in public education in various aspects of IP, not limited to trademarks. Ms. Mohammed attained a Bachelor's of Arts degree with honors in business management and completed a postgraduate certificate in business management in 2012 and 2016, respectively, through the Andrea Ruskin University. Her thesis also focused on a critical evaluation of brand value for businesses in Trinidad and Tobago's economic recession, the case of intellectual property. I would love to read it. She is presently pursuing her Bachelor of Laws degree. Ms. Mohammed has also completed numerous distance learning courses with WIPO, to name a few, advanced distance learning course on trademark, among others, with, as they say, WIPO or WIPO. Ms. Mohammed has been employed at the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs for over 10 years. So thank you so much, Ms. Mohammed. And of course, we have Ms. Anelia Baiju. She has been employed at the Trinidad and Tobago Intellectual Property Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs since 2011. With over 10 years working experience at the IPO, she is now a Senior Trademark Examiner of the Madrid Protocol Processing Unit of Trinidad and Tobago. Ms. Baiju has completed many advanced WIPO or WIPO intellectual property courses in the areas of trademark, industrial design, geographical indications, copyright, and IP management, just to name a few. So ladies, I hand over to you all and thank you all so much for doing our third Lunch and Learn.
And Leslie, if I may, before the start, I just want to bring greetings from the Intellectual Property Office. My name is Kaveh Sital. I am currently the Acting Controller of the Intellectual Property Office. Mr. Reagan Asgaradi sends his regards. We are friends with FilmTT, have been friends for a very long time, partnered on many things. And I hope to have some robust discussions here today with all of the persons involved, and anyone who has any questions, feel free to reach out to us. As part of the Intellectual Property Office, we have a National IP Training Center. Some of you might be familiar with it. Some of you might be hearing that for the first time and thinking, what is that? It's our National IP Academy, essentially, and it allows the IP office to have public education initiatives, and allows us to work with our partners like FilmTT for outreach on many different areas of IP. Copyright, as you're about to learn, is a pretty important area. It takes up a lot of our headspace and our time and our talents. And Ms. Baiju and Ms. Mohammed are no strangers to all of the issues that have plagued our office with regard to copyright. We get requests daily for information. So I bring you warm greetings and I look forward to robust discussions.
Thank you, Mr. Sital. I am going to share my screen. I will do the first half of the presentation and my colleague Anelia will do the second half. So everyone's seeing my screen, right? Yes. Okay, great.
Yes.
Thank you. So as Leslie gave a wonderful introduction, I was actually telling my colleague, it's like, was that me she was reading about? Didn't realize. And but thank you for your lovely introduction. So let's get into first off, feel free at any time during the presentation, you all could raise your hand, put the questions in the chat. That's fine with me. But we will have a question answer discussion after. So getting into IP in the film industry, I'm going to give a short introduction, some definitions of what intellectual property is, the different types of intellectual property, and then jumping right into copyright and related rights, trademarks, financing for film, licenses, and brief conclusion. So I know a lot of persons on the platform are familiar with what intellectual property is, but just to state, intellectual property refers to expressed creations of the mind, and this is a WIPO definition. So I'm not sure if you all know the story behind this picture, but this is a picture. His name is Naruto. And in short, a photographer left his camera unattended, and Naruto decided to go take a selfie of himself, and there was a conversation about who owns the IP in that. And it's express creations of the mind, and as the bottom says, IP is not monkey's business, so Naruto can't have intellectual property or copyright for the photo that he took, even though he has a very nice smile in the photo, but he can't have IP in his photo. So intellectual property, there are two arms to intellectual property. There's industrial property and copyright and related rights. Industrial property has to do with your trademarks, your patents, industrial designs, geographical indications, integrated circuits, and new plant varieties. And copyright has to do with the long list that you see on your right side of your screen. We will get into all of those lists in separate slides, so no need to stress about the list. And it's not limited to those. There are many other things that fall under copyright and related rights as well. So getting into IP in films. So there are two aspects, main aspects of intellectual property when you're talking about films. There's copyright and related rights and trademarks. So firstly, we're going into copyright and related rights. Copyright is the protection of literary and artistic works. And I'm sure you all will know all of these different films, minus the two at the bottom with games, but those are to also show the images have copyright protection in them as well. So copyright, what we like to do, this is a little acronym. So copyright, we like to use this little acronym called the CARD acronym. So it's communication, adaptation, reproduction, and distribution. So it gives you the right to do these four things. So does anyone know this image at the back of the screen or where it came from? It's a very old image, if you all know the image. If not, it is Nightcrawler from X-Men. Good guess though. I did have trouble figuring out who it was at the initial start when I saw it as well, but it is Nightcrawler from X-Men. And if you all remember Nightcrawler from X-Men, he disappears and appears. So that is what the essence behind the slide is. And we like to say that copyright is an intangible asset. So it's there, but not there at the same time, if that makes sense to you all. We are going to get into some things that can be copyrighted. So as I mentioned from the slide explaining different types of IP and the list under copyright and related rights, there are many different things that fall under copyright protection and what can be copyrighted. So you have your musical works, your stage production, public performances, screenplay. There's a big word in the middle there, works of mass. Those are like your traditional cultural expressions and your traditional knowledge. You have sound recordings, paintings, drawings, engravings, list goes on with the amount of things that are here, can be. Now we look at what cannot be copyrighted. So I did mention in even the definition of what IP is, that it's express creations. So you can't copyright an idea, you can't copyright a procedure, discoveries, legislative texts, political speeches, all of these things. Can't copyright an idea because it has to be an expressed creation of the mind. So you have to put it in some tangible form to be able to say that you have some kind of IP protection. And furthermore, copyright protection in it. It has to be written down, it has to be recorded, it has to be drawn, painted, whatever it be. So copyright is vested in the works, and this is according to Section 5 of our Copyright Act. It entails, as I mentioned, stage productions, musical works, audiovisual works. Specifically, this is specifically for film, as you would see, photography works, audiovisual fixations, again, not limited to. And so we go into audiovisual works. Audiovisual works, according to Section 3 of the Copyright Act, is a work that consists of series of related images, which impart the impression of motion with or without accompanying sounds, susceptible of being made visible, and where accompanied by sounds susceptible of being made audible. So that, again, is, I think it is easy to see that what audiovisual works is, and you all are familiar with what audiovisual works is. This is what you all do. Again, feel free to stop me and ask me anything. I can't see the chat if you all are putting questions, so if anyone wants to check the chat and ask me or answer them in the chat, that's fine.
Hey, Steffi, are you getting to audiovisual fixation? Because I saw that on the other slide, and I'm not sure what's the difference between audiovisual work and audiovisual fixation. Maybe it's something really simple.
So can I save that question for later on?
Of course.
Sure. So I will note it and I will save it for later on. Yep. Okay. So a big part of, I don't know who will like or not like the image below. So if you don't like it, excuse the image below it, is just to make a point that when you are setting your copyright, it's important to use the copyright legend, hence the picture of the movie at the background. In the background, I am legend, so you use your copyright legend. You see in the circle, you put your name in place of the copyright owner wording there, the year it was created, all rights reserved. One important thing that you can also do, what we call the poor man's copyright, or you can do, which is registered mail sent back to yourself of all your drafts of your whether it be a play, if you're writing a play and you have all your scripts from inception till, you can do all of that as registered mail. Further, you can do a statutory declaration with an attorney swearing that you are the owner and the creator of the particular work that is attached or listed in that statutory declaration itself. And WIPO proof, that is something that is available for persons through the World Intellectual Property Organization. You could literally just type in WIPO proof online and you will get all the information. It's something affiliated with WIPO. So jumping into related rights. So related rights are rights of the performers, including actors, broadcasters, producers, and producers of the sound recordings. So that is, when initially we started talking, we mentioned copyright and then related rights. So yes, copyright would be in the actual written form, let's say the script. Let's go with that because we are talking about films. So let's say the script. but there are other rights that would be associated for with an entire film itself. And this is where these persons, these participants, they also have rights in the entire production of film. So the rights and copyright, I did mention the card rights, which are the economic rights. And then there's also moral rights that are afforded to persons that fall under copyright. So economic rights would be your quote money rights, and then your moral rights is the right to be named and to be mentioned as the author and the creator of the particular work. And that allows you to not have your work distorted. So even though something may be changed or whatnot, but you are still supposed to be mentioned as the, according to moral rights, you do have moral rights still in that work to be mentioned as the initial, at least, creator and author of that particular work. And as the bottom mentions, can be waived in writing. Yes, you can waive your moral rights in writing. It has to be in writing, whether it be contractual agreements or however they be. If it is that you are selling your moral rights or assigning your moral rights to someone, it has to be expressed in writing. So there are a few general rules in copyright. One being the original owner is the creator. If your work is done in the course of employment, your employer is the creator of it. And this does not include, again, this does not include independent contractors. Independent contractors, you will have different contractual agreements with them before you get into work with them. And independent contractors can be, you can hire someone to do just the graphics for the movie. You can hire someone to do just audio for a movie or vocals for a movie. So it depends on all those different contracts. And cost of employment, of course, is also based on it. It is based on your contract. However, there's a general rule that your employer would retain the copyright once it is done in the course of employment through your working hours. And at the bottom there, all those pictures at the bottom there, I know you all will be very familiar with all of those. Those are some of the biggest production companies that are out there. And just to slip in there that Disney is actually in the top 10. I believe it was number 8 when we checked yesterday. In the top 10, number 8 of the best brands, top 100 brands in the world. And they are the only production company in the top 10. Not only production, they don't only do production, but they are the only one that is there in the top 10. So I know it's always been said copyright is an automatic protection, and then that's why people don't necessarily take it so seriously, because they think, oh, well, it's automatic. So, you know, they can write anything or record anything and they have protection for it. Yes, it is automatic once it's original. That has to be always a criteria there. It has to always be original. There's no registration in Trinidad that is required for it. And your duration is the life of the author plus 50 years after the death of the author. And AV at the bottom, that's audiovisual. Audiovisual works is 75 years from the date of the publication. So it's not from the date when you actually started doing work with it, but from the date of publication of it. So I know this slide is a bit weedy, but it's definitely all relevant to you all. So there are many different, as you can see, aspects of copyright when you're talking about copyright on films. You have to talk about the artistic part of it, which is the entire set design. Then you have the dramatic works, which is all whether it be a dance or a mime or whatever it be during the film itself. Then you have to take into consideration the literary part of a film, the source material, the original screenplay that was done. Then you go into the musical works. So you have to take into consideration all the copyright that is in the soundtracks, whether it be just the musical score or whether it be the lyrics, the actual film itself, the images in the film itself, the sound recordings, broadcasts and cable usage. All of those things are definitely important when it comes to film and copyright. You have to also ensure that whether there are any live interpretations of the film, and of course the published editions within the typographical layout of the page of any published versions of the screenplay. So you always have to ensure that all of these things are taken into consideration and let's say cleared before and when you're looking at film and intellectual property. So we're going to touch on clearances and what clearances really are with respect to film. Clearances can be clearances from be it property, be it people, or be it locations. So when you are doing a film, yes, you have to ensure you get your permission or clearances from persons. But when it comes to property, when it comes to people and releases and all of that, you have to ensure that not only you get the permission to use the property, you have to use the property for just filming, but then you need to make sure that you have permission for anything that's in the background of the particular property that you're using for your film. You have to ensure that you have specific clearances from each one of the persons that may be involved in the film, no matter how small their role might be, even if no matter how small their role might be, that's their image. So you have to make sure you have all those clearances and releases in writing specifically. You have to make sure you also have your clearances when it comes to the music aspect of it with your film as well, in the location as well. And at the bottom where it says lease or rental agreement for the location, you have to make sure that you have you will have your agreement for the location, but you have to make sure that you can also film in the location for your particular film. And again, stressing all in writing, regardless of like, I know this person or this is my friend's backyard. Please still get it in writing, because you never know how things will play out when your film goes and takes off. You really never know how things play out. I saw a hand raise. That's when I saw Jody.
Yes. Hi. Okay. So
Hi.
Two things.
Sure.
You said one of the last things that you said about locations, getting your clearance, but you also need permission to, so you have your clearance, the location said you could film there, but you mentioned needing something additional. You also need to have permission. Can you just repeat what you said?
Okay, so I think it probably was, yes, you have your permission to film there, but you have a lot of other things in your background as well. So you have to make sure your permission is detailed to specifically let you know what you have your
like
permission.
If you have a painting in the background or something like that, you
if
mean?
There's something, anything in your background.
So anything that
there's like,
yeah, go ahead, Ms. Baju. Go ahead, Ms. Baju.
Right. So when she's talking about property and location, so yes, there are some places, public spaces that you're free to, do your production, but then you need certain clearances. I believe it's the National Archive. I believe it's that entity that you need permission, because there are certain buildings that you need clearances in order to feature in your production itself. So that's what she's referring to in terms of having the clearances.
Okay, so the other question I was asking was about people and needing to get it expressed in writing. But I know sometimes, let's say if you're filming on a street, you might put up a sign saying that if you come, we're filming, and if you come in this area, you're essentially agreeing to use your likeness. Now, how does that work? Because if someone, how would that work? Because we wouldn't be able to get everyone's signature on a clearance form, but yet we know that we did put up a sign saying if you come in this area, we're filming, you're allowing us to use your likeness. How would you say that works?
Now, if it is, they see the sign and they're still coming within the location, I mean, it kind of seems like they implying permission, right? But I mean, situations do happen like that. But we have to take account of once you've covered your basis in terms of getting the clearances for persons to be featured in the film, that's great. You have up to sign, right? I mean, that's a what if situation, I guess you're talking about.
And if I may add, so from the question before, you have to think about anything in your background that may be protected by some other trademark or some other form of intellectual property. So let's say you're filming and there's a bottle with a brand on it, popular brand. So now you would see in a lot of public audiences, they would remove the labels or they put it in a empty glass because you don't want to necessarily, it's not that you may not want to associate with that brand, but that brand may not want to associate specifically with you yet, unless you're doing some sort of partnership with them, in which case you want to showcase the brand, you put it front and center. And some people move it to the side or something like that. That's a joke from football, but that happens where you want your brand front and center. The brand would be on the banner, the brand would be on the coming as one of the sponsors on the name of the film or something like that. So you have to think about what's in your background and make sure that everything is covered, because if you aren't covered from anything, you're opening yourself up to liability. The second thing with people is the issue of image rights. And you have image rights and the right to private life under our constitution. So while we don't necessarily have some what we call sunset legislation with regard to image rights, a very specific piece of separate legislation that deals with image rights, people have the right to their private life. So if you are in a public place that does not require some sort of specific permission to film there, and just to say there are places in Trinidad and Tobago and around the Caribbean and around the world where if you are filming in a public place, you have to get permission to film there. You may have to pay a certain license to film there, etc. We have them sometimes across the beaches, etc. So if you are in that place, then you are getting permission to film there, and you have to put up your set. And in your set design, you have to be able to have your crew stopping people from entering or exiting accordingly, because it is a film set that you have permission for. If you are in a place where you don't need permission, you are in a public place and you don't need permission, you should think about how you're going to inform the persons who may be around what is happening. And that, as you said, there's a film set and that you put up a sign that says filming in progress. Great. That is one start. And then you may have a staff member of yours that says, well, okay, we're doing some filming here, please, or alternatively, you see it a lot in documentaries, you blur out people's image because they are not an actor acting on your film set. So you tend to have background faces blurred out because, again, the right to private life and image rights, you may not want to necessarily have it. So it's a tricky balancing act that you would have to ensure that you are playing, and you have to ensure that you do so within the confines of the law. I don't know if that answered your question. I went into a bunch of detail there, Jody Marie.
Thank you, it did. Thank you.
Right. I don't know. The presenters, there's another question. I'll leave it to you.
I saw, I don't know if that's Leandra's hand. I saw Leandra's hand. I don't know if that's a question or there's a question in the chat.
Hi, yeah, this is Leander. Thank you so much. My question had to do with filming in residential areas. And let's say your shot requires you to point down a street. So in the background would be the location you have permission to film, but also adjacent residences. Does clearance require you to get a release from each of the neighbors whose residence may feature in the background of the shot? Thank you so much.
I'm gonna have the most loyally answer for you. It depends.
Yeah.
I
know that was coming.
that doesn't answer my question. I'll come back to, if you have a house, some buildings are works of architecture. Technically, all buildings are work of architecture, but some buildings are simplistic and the copyright behind it, it may not meet the threshold for copyright. Yeah, but some do, and homes included. And so you may have copyright in the architectural design of someone's home. And you have to think about that when you're filming as well. So it's one thing to think about the clearances from, well, okay, I'm filming down a street and I got clearance for this home, and do I need to get clearances for the entire street? If you are, for example, in a gated community, you may very well need clearances from every single person on that street. If you are in a public place, you may not. But if you're in a public place and it has some architectural design, then the law allows you to film it, yes. But then, you don't want to end up in a situation where they say, well, my home is protected and I paid for this architecture and you didn't come to me for my permission and I didn't really want it in your film. So it really depends on the circumstances. There are places where you're allowed to film in public places, and there are places where you may need a license, or if you don't have a license, you may not be allowed to film. So it really depends, Leander. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Leander. Does that answer the question in any amount of sufficiency?
It absolutely does, and you pronounced it perfectly. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Ladies, you wanted to add anything to that, Ms. Baiju or Ms. Mohammed?
No, it really does depend on the particular situation. Yeah, couldn't have said it better, Mr. Sitahal. Thank you. Okay, so going right along into another little tricky area here of synchronization. So as a producer, you must, again, acquire all your licenses with the agreements, for the rights in the artistic, dramatic, literary, and musical elements of the film. So you have to, as I keep mentioning from the start of talking about copyright, that original owner and creator, there can be different, let's say, slight changes to things, but there is also, you should also try to always get that permission and an assignment and whatnot from that original creator.
Can I hear anything? I
think we lost
So
her.
I'm pretty sure we all noticed
Ms. Mohammed, you want to pause? I think we lost you on for a little bit.
And the
We
Grinch.
did?
We did.
I think, yeah, they lost you on the former slide.
Everything from the former slide? I'm
Yes.
not sure where you are. Okay, apologies then. Okay, so this again was just to emphasize that a producer must acquire the Okay, not to stop the thing. I think somebody has their mic on. It's distracting. I'm not sure if you'll hear me properly. Thank you. So, producer must acquire the licenses or the agreements in the artistic, dramatic, literary, and musical elements of the film. I've been saying this from the start. I will still continue to say it, and even when Anelia joins in to present, she will, I'm sure, emphasize that you need to make sure that you acquire your particular permissions for every single thing that is used in the footage of the film. Yeah, y'all got that now, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so back to Let It Go now. So as I was saying, this slide is really you shouldn't try to ensure that you do register with one of the copyright collecting societies. And this is really to allow you to have an ease of trying to follow up with persons or where your songs or jingles or whatever they may be, where they may be played, where they may be sung or whatnot. Is to give you the ease to literally let go of you having to do all that administrative work, let's say, behind all of that, and have your copyright collecting society do that for you instead. And there are always underlying works, especially when it comes to films. And when it comes to films, if a film is based on a novel, or a play or biographies, you have to ensure that you really cover every single little thing. And I'm sure you all are if you all didn't know that before, I'm pretty sure you all are seeing how deep copyright can go and how you have to get your permissions for every single little thing. And as the slide says, there can be underlying things that, yes, there may be underlying things that you may not know, but as much as you can, try to get all your permissions. And this last slide is a funny slide. In a way, I'm not sure if you all know the show below, but the character, so the second to last character on the left side, he played a few of the characters in this, and this is just to say there are some exceptions to copyright, and that is when it entails teaching, libraries and archives, quotations, and news. So those are a few of the exceptions to copyright. I saw Nisha's hand.
I'm very interested in the copyright of music, and who would we go to as local producers and directors to manage this musical copyright issue for us? Would that be COT?
It would be.
Hi, okay, so I just want to add to that answer, right? The onus is on the persons to go and check with the collective management organizations on their own. So we cannot advise as to which body that you are to go to, but we do encourage you to check the CMOs and see what rights they administer. That will be on the person who's seeking to protect their work. That's your responsibility. The IPO can't advise us to which body to go to. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to reemphasize we have a press release, a nice detailed press release that actually deals with this. The press release went to court and was upheld in court as the Architecture of or Copyright Act. So there's a press release that accurately states the law, and it says, find out whose copyrighted work are you looking to use and who has the relevant rights to synchronize it. FilmTT can assist you with that. FilmTT is Leslie Ann is no stranger to synchronization. Recently when we went to that event, Music TT, that FilmTT was with them, they talked about the synchronization of music, and a film without music, I don't think I've ever seen one. Other than silent films, I guess, which I saw a few, but films without music these days, sometimes the score is what makes the film. I think of Interstellar. Well, where would Interstellar be without that fantastic score that was done for it? So go to your relevant CMO, and FilmTT can offer you some assistance in that regard.
I just have one more question regarding music. Is this if you're making money alone? I just have this concept in my head that if we're going to film festivals, all of these copyright issues don't apply because there's no monetary transaction. Is that accurate or not?
You said at a film festival, usually there is some type of monetary, whether indirect or indirect, there's some sort of commercial activity happening. And the act does, the legislation and the Berne Convention talks about the commercialization of it, whether directly or indirectly. So once there is some sort of indirect commercial activity happening, then that would be considered commercial activity. Just to say, when you have someone playing music on a stage, it's called a public performance, right? But even when you have music playing from a DJ, it's also called a public performance. So you have public performances of works. And I don't want to limit your mind to think of a performance as someone just singing. There's a public performance of works when it's played in a public place, whether by recording or not. And that public performance per se attracts copyright protection it attracts the rights in copyright for the copyright protected work, and it attracts the owner of the rights in order to enforce their copyright. So if you are doing something for non-commercial purposes, you may still need to get a license, and you may have to clear it with the CMO, because even though you may believe it's non-commercial, there may be some sort of indirect commercial activity happening. Yeah, I hope that made sense. Nisha? I also hope
thank you. Yes, thanks.
Okay, so I know I saw Jody's hand up, but can we save the question? I want to jump over to Anelia's part of the presentation, if possible. Can you? Okay, thank you.
Yes, of course.
So I'm going to jump over and pass you to Anelia, who will take you through your second half.
All right. So thank you, Steffi. Allow me to share. All right, so you see my screen?
What's your mode? Yeah, there we go.
Yes? All right.
Next.
So the last thing my colleague would have addressed was the exceptions to copyright. Okay. Now copyright, so in one of the documents in terms of articles that are out there speaking about copyright and the film industry, there was an article by the World Intellectual Property Organization that said that copyright is the linchpin of filmmaking because it's heavily engraved in terms of film production. All right. And there are different layers of rights that relate to different elements of film production. So if you're talking about the screenplay, the music, the performances, and so forth. So copyright is heavily involved in terms of film production, which my colleague just went into, and she spoke about the exceptions to copyright being instances where you would not need the permission of the copyright holder in terms of for teaching purposes, for personal use, for quotation, news, archives, and libraries and so forth and so parts. All right. So moving along now to copyright infringement. So what is copyright infringement? Essentially, it is when copyrighted work is used without the permission of the copyright holder. All right. And obviously, this will have a negative impact in terms of the copyright holder, where you have person using your work without your permission. All right. And what happens? So if a person is guilty of that offense, the penalty, they have to pay a fine of $250,000 and 10 years imprisonment. So it's quite a hefty fine, as well as the 10 years of imprisonment. They can also pursue injunction as well as seizure and destruction of the infringing copies of the work. Digital piracy. What is digital piracy? Well, this is the legal copying of copyrighted work via the internet. All right. And again, this affects the creative industry in terms of the musical works, musical compositions, the film industry. So here we have some examples of the work that has been done in terms of addressing this issue. So we had this article with the headline of 4,000 pirate CDs being crushed, DVDs being crushed. We see artists uniting to fight against this issue in terms of piracy and ongoing campaign against piracy. So while my colleague has focused on copyright, I will be focusing on trademark. All right, so trademark. What is a trademark? So while we have a technical definition of any sign that must be graphically represented that is capable of distinguishing, let's forget that technical definition and just focus on the keywords here, being a word, it could be a symbol, it could be a logo that is used to distinguish one entity from another. All right, and of course, without even saying what this trademark is, I'm pretty sure that you all can identify. Yes? Give me a thumbs up. Give me a yes.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And this is to show the beauty of establishing a brand, a distinctive brand. You're creating that identity that differentiates you from your competitors. All right? So while we're talking here about traditional trademark in terms of a word, a symbol, a logo, there is also provision in the law now to facilitate non-traditional marks in terms of sound marks. And recently we had our first filing of a sound mark, Rambunctious, and we actually have the agent as a participant today who facilitated that process, right? So this is to give you an idea that, okay, you have copyright in the work, but there's also the trademark in the work. And we're not just talking about, you know, the figurative elements like we're seeing right now, but also in terms of sound. And if I were to ask you to give me some examples, some very distinctive sound as it relates to sound in terms of film production, sorry, what would you tell me? Anybody? Don't all rush it.
I think the Universal Studios, one of those studios has this kind of distinct sound when a movie's about to start.
Exactly. Right, okay, good, right? So basically, most film production, as soon as a movie begins, you know, you could pretty much know. So if you're talking about the MGW Lion Roar, yes. If you're talking about Disney, yes. If you're talking about 20th Century Fox, yes. All right, so those are all very distinctive sound trademarks. So good, we're on the same page. All right, so here, just to give you an idea of the relevant statutes regarding trademark. So you have the Trademarks Act number 8 of 2015 and its accompanying regulation. And in terms of protection, so we talk about copyright, the term of protection, life of the author plus 50 years after he has passed on. In terms of the trademark, it is 10 years and can be renewable indefinitely. All right. Now, can anyone identify what trademark is on this slide?
Netflix, of course.
Very good. Good. So that is the point of your brand, all right, is to act as a badge of origin to make that connection with your good or service and with the proprietor. So that is what you'll be aiming for. Now, I spoke about your mark. It has to be distinctive in order to be capable of distinguishing the goods or services. So in this slide, it's just basically showing you that the stronger marks, trademarks, tend to be the fanciful marks, the marks that are newly coined, all right, and the arbitrary marks. So this is with regard to you have existing words, but in relation to the product, it's distinctive. Because if I were to ask you, if you look at the example on this screen here, the lion is roaring, you know, you look at that and you would never think about this is their brand for their movie, right? So that would be considered a very distinctive mark, as opposed to marks that are descriptive and generic, but those marks would tend to be the weaker trademarks. So I would stay away from those kind of trademarks. All right. Now, as you're thinking about the industry, the film industry, and you're thinking about your trademark, so your trademark could be your company name. You can consider doing your domain name as your trademark as well. All right. Title of movies is also trademark material, as well as characters. All right. So if you think about movies such as Star Wars and Simpsons and so forth, they will trademark their characters as well. And if you're thinking about IP and utilizing, commercializing on your IP, so then you think about trademark and merchandising, and you're leveraging on your IP, and that's a way of getting funds to incorporate back into your production. All right. Right. So next, so I was talking about cost and getting revenues. All right, leveraging your IP in terms of trademark and merchandising and so forth. So which is links to my next slide here in terms of financing and marketing for film. All right. So here we have the example of grants from the Ministry of Arts and assistance from this particular program from Trinidad and Tobago Film Company. And then you have product placement. Now, product placement is something that we see often in films, in movies, all right? So we may not have known the term is product placement, all right? But this product placement is not by chance, it is actually by design, all right? And these different products, different brands has been strategically placed in the script, in the film, all right, by these brand owners as a means of marketing their product, all right? And if you think about it, it is a win-win in terms of the brand owner as well as the producer of the film, all right? So in terms of the brand owner, they are promoting their brand. Of course, it will be a contractual arrangement, all right? And in terms of the producer, they're able to, again, to get some sort of monies in terms of this exchange. Good. So moving along. Okay, so before I move on to my next slide, in terms of example, can anyone think of any sort of product placement that you would have seen in movies? So off the bat, I remember, I'm sure everyone would have seen Forrest Gump. There was the Nike in place when he was wearing the shoes. That's one.
Story about Wendy. I think they had
Angostura.
product placement, I think, with Johnny Walker, I think.
Okay, good.
And,
Yes.
and Angostura. I think Angostura was in Story About Wendy as well, but she was putting it on the orange. And also the Korean drama series on Netflix and wherever. They do a lot of product placement with Samsung and LG and all of those high-tech things that they produce in Korea.
Yes. And who are into the Avengers franchise and so forth, you always seen Audi and this kind of thing with Iron Man. So yes, I saw somebody raise their hand.
It was me. I was just going to give a recent example. Cindy here,
Yes.
sorry.
Yes.
Fiji Water and Bullet Train, to the point that it was almost an additional character.
Yes. I saw that. Yeah. Right. So good. So we're familiar with that. All right. Right, so now we're moving on to license. Okay, so what is the license? Well, it's an agreement between the IP holder and a third party, and where they're giving permission for someone else to use their work. Again, contractual arrangement. So it's explicit rights to use the IP. It's a digital permit, and there are different types of licenses. So we have the public performances license. Mr. Sita would have spoken about that. My colleague would have also spoken about the synchronization license as well. We have mechanical licenses, the right to reproduce and distribute specific composition at an agreed upon fee. All right. Broadcasting, in terms of granting a licensee permission to use a portion of the radio frequency in a given geographical area. And then we have audio products and media licenses also, another example. Here we have an example of a standard music license agreement. And here is an example of a mechanical license. So they talk about the ownership and composition. The license, they talk about the royalty in terms of the distribution of the monies, percentage. Here is an example of a synchronization license agreement. Again, grant of the synchronization license, who's the licensee, and so forth. Right, moving on to the challenges faced with new media license formats. So you have the involvement of internet service providers to assist in against piracy. All right, so we saw that as an issue in terms of the creative industry, and the involvement of ISPs is very integral in terms of addressing this issue. And sometimes the involvement may perhaps a temporary reduction of the internet speed or a redirection of the landing page. All right, and then you have the consumer piracy. Mr. Sital addressed that earlier in terms of knowing think about it in terms of your film production. Do not put persons into your film production without their consent, authorization. And then we have the notice and takedown provision. So this is where something we see on YouTube very often, where content, we cannot access it because persons who would have uploaded it did so without the copyright holder's consent. All right, so this brings us to the end of our presentation. You know, it's short, to the point. Of course, it would have raised a lot of questions in person's mind, and of course, we could always have a follow-up presentation to address, because think about it, we just touched the surface of things. Each area we could actually delve into more in terms of addressing the issues. All right, so the points to remember: register your IEP. All right, so while trademark, there's a formal procedure in terms of registering trademark. Copyright, there's no formal procedure, but my colleagues spoke about the ways in which you go about asserting your copyright. Yes, sign your agreements relative to your IP ownership, obtain the relevant permissions, releases, clearances, and so forth. Yes, all right, so I'm trying to wrap up because, you know, we had just an hour, so good, we finished on time.
Will we take a copy of this online, like another version, like a recorded version or something?
I'll let Leslie and Daniel answer that. I think it was recorded, and I think the recording
and then we put it up on our YouTube platform. But we'll talk to IPO as well to see what else they would want to share with us, and we will work with them in terms of the platform and how they want to share it, because it's a lot of information and it's just scratching the surface. And we really want you all to reach out and have that conversation about the copyright and the trademark. It's so important in terms of filmmaking. So this is really just to whet the appetite for you to want to know more. I don't know if you wanted to take Cecile's question before we close.
Yeah, I see there are a couple of questions. I mean, if you want to leave us, and we can take a couple of questions here.
Yes, I am okay with that.
So everyone, if you're gonna leave, please feel free to leave.
We want to just do a quick survey. Daniel, just for the poll, and then we can stay and answer questions.
Yeah, Ms. Baiju, I particularly like that last slide that said "remember" and the background with Mufasa. Because that's what he said to Simba. Remember. Yes, exactly. You see, let me know what I'm talking about.
Gosh, they're just film nerds, that's all.
I think there were two questions, one from Cecile and then one somebody asked in the chat if they could answer any questions. Gillian, we're here for a little while. You could also send your questions, as Ms. Prasad said, but we're here for a little while. So ask us, what do you need to ask us now?
Yes, I had a quick question. I was working with someone who has been trying, he says, for the last year or so since I gave him the material, to copyright this document. It's a treatment. It's not this full script yet, but it's a treatment that's designed to show how we're going to work on this docudrama. And he says he hasn't been able to do it down here for whatever. I don't know what the reason is. I don't understand really what the problem is. So how does one go about it? And do you have a rough idea of the actual cost to copyright a treatment or a script down here?
Ms. Baiju, Ms. Mohammed, you want to take that real quick? Yeah.
Sure. So I don't know if you missed that at the start of the presentation. So Ms.
Probably.
Mohammed spoke about copyright protection is automatic, right? So there's no formal procedure for you to register for copyright protection, but there are different ways in which you go about asserting your copyright, giving notice to the public that you are the creator of the work. And you would do that in terms of doing a statutory declaration. So you can go to a commission of affidavits, you swear the document stating that the person is the creator of the work, you attach a copy of the work to the statutory declaration. All right, so that's one means of asserting your copyright. There's also where you would do the poor man's copy. You send a copy of the work back to yourself via registered mail, and the point of that is to have the date, which is very crucial in terms of creation of the work. All right, so those are the two main areas in terms of asserting your copyright, because again, we do not have a registration system in Trinidad and Tobago.
Okay, because the problem is he's trying to take it international, so I
Right.
don't know that would hold up too well internationally.
Well, so there are registries, just to add, there are registries in other countries, in particular in the United States.
United States, right.
So for the purposes of enforcement and evidentiary issues, you need to register your copyright in the United States. But I need to say what Ms. Baiju said is 100% clear, and across all countries that are party to the Berne Convention, which are all countries in the world, that copyright is an automatic right. So there is an international treaty called the Berne Convention that applies to all countries, including the United States, that copyright is an automatic right. Now, the US has put something in place to say if you are going to enforce or you need evidence, you need to have registration. And there you go to the copyright registry through their Library of Congress. So I don't know if that is the process they're trying to do. I am certain now that that process is an online process.
Yes.
I visited Washington in the recent past, and I visited the Library of Congress as well as part of what I was doing there, amongst other things. It was work related, and I believe the conversation was it has been online for a while. So it could very well be that this online tool is available and you just have to bite the bullet and use it. Sometimes these online tools can be a bit daunting. So
yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I hope that answers. And there are other registries in many other countries across the world. For example, Jamaica has a depository, etc. But the law remains the same. The law across all the countries, copyright is an automatic right, protected upon creation. Some countries have said, no, if you're going to enforce, please, we need to show some sort of evidence and we need to have a date. But in essence, those registries are not testing the originality, because then they would test the originality of a million songs. That wouldn't make much sense. They are giving you a date and time stamp that says, on this day, I came to the registry and declared and swore that this is mine and I created it.
Right. All right. Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Nisha, I think, had a question.
Well, the first thing I want to say is that I studied abroad in the States, and I don't know if it's changed within the past few decades, but we were also taught about that in school, in university, we were taught about that poor man's registry of putting your script in an envelope, registering it, and sending it out. So back then it worked. I don't know about what it is currently. My question is the Artist Registry of Trinidad and Tobago. Do they support local works with regard to copyright? The Artist Registry through the ministry.
I don't know if the Artist Registry, I'll take the latter question first, and I may hand over to the team here to answer the other question. I don't know if the Artist Registry supports copyright per se. No, there is no entity that registers copyright in Trinidad and Tobago because there is no registry. So they may support, I presume this is what you're asking, if they help you get some sort of evidentiary protection, they may support you in having assignments readily available. For example, if you are dealing with other persons and you're working with them and you hired an independent contractor to do something on your behalf, for example, a photographer, or if you need a statutory declaration, they might have one on hand. I mean, FilmTT also has these things, so FilmTT could offer you some assistance in that regard. I don't know if the artist registry is, I'm saying Cindy is saying the artist registry is merely a certification regarding skills. Good, yes. That's how I understand them as well. So in terms of your question, I don't know if they support copyright because there is no registration process required in Trinidad and Tobago. They may have all these things to help support you, no doubt. So, yes, I don't know. Did I answer your question in totality, Nisha?
Yes.
So wait, there was a formal question.
Yes.
What was
So
it?
the
Your
answer
first
is
question was? Your first question, Nisha, was...
Oh, it wasn't a question. It was a
Performance
statement of my
process.
experience about the
She was
performance.
confirming about the performance copy, yeah.
Right.
Well,
So, I mean, the
decades ago.
performance copy, slightly, I know this being recorded. I don't know if you recorded stuff. Slightly ghetto. No, in terms of, honestly, it's something that you have to keep and you can't open it. And how do you prove you didn't open it? And then if it comes into question, you have to take it to court. All of these things. And yes, if you do a statutory declaration, you have to keep it, but you can make copies of it and you can prove that on a day at a certain time, you went to a commission of affidavits and do this. Now, the same, in essence, process can be done if you keep digital timestamps of what you created. So if you write a script, you write a screenplay, you send it back to yourself. I mean, I've written lots of stuff and you send it back to yourself on WhatsApp, you send it back to yourself via email, you send it to somebody else you're co-creating with. You create a digital trail, especially if you use things like Google Docs. I presume lots of you use some sort of software that keeps track of everything. Google Docs, you could go back into the history of the document for months and months. So if you have some sort of digital trail that you keep, that has the effect of offering you, for evidentiary purposes, some form of protection. A final draft as well, yes. I agree with Leslie. Keep your final drafts, keep your final dates, and if you go to a commission of affidavits. Sorry, Ms. Baju?
And also saying keep all your mocks as well.
Yeah, keep your drafts, keep your mocks, keep it all, and have them date and time stamped. So digital copies automatically do that for you, where like if you go into a Word document, it's supposed to have in the document details when it was created, when it was modified, who was the last person to modify it, or at least the last person to log into your computer. So digital timestamps are extremely important. Yeah. Because I guess in terms of a statutory declaration, you can do one statutory declaration with a bunch of things. If cost is going to be an issue, because if you're a creator and you think, well, I need to go to do separate statutory declarations with all of these projects I'm working on, it's going to be difficult and can become slightly expensive. Not that statutory declarations are necessarily very expensive, but you can see how it would mount up, which is why registries, copyright registries, at least for Trinidad and Tobago, it's a bit of a tough premise, because then every single song everyone would want to do. And yeah, you may think that's really good, but if you're Lil Wayne, who says he comes out of a studio with 40, 50 songs, every time he comes out of the studio multiple times a week, like you're looking at hundreds of songs every week, thousands of songs per month. So are you going to register all of them individually? Are you going to pay the price to register all of them individually? It becomes very, very difficult. So any questions? I see Jody is nodding her head. Jody Marie, yes. I hope this was helpful.
I'm seeing a question in the chat, Kavish, from Leander.
Leander, yeah.
Please, yes.
This is also, yeah, I see it as well. This is also hold for film festivals. Is there copyright in the creation of the film festival? It depends on whether it falls within the scope of one of the things that are protected under copyright. So when you say it's for the film festival itself, the design of the film festival could be protected by copyright. The music that you create at the film festival will be protected by copyright. The way that you set up the stage production can be protected by copyright. There's so many elements throughout anything that would have creative elements joining together or created individually that may have protection. Because someone could be coming to the film festival with a set design for the stage that is beautiful, huge sculpture. That would independently have its own protection and copyright by the creator. And that person may be donating that sculpture to the film festival, but that does not mean that they are donating the copyright. So they're donating the sculpture, great, but they may not have donated the copyright behind the sculpture. And they may be putting it in a public place, which says, okay, you're allowed to film it, you're allowed to to put it in some sort of other artwork. Yes, it's in a public place, but at the same time, you can't recreate my sculpture without my permission. That's my copyright. That's my intangible asset. Like Nightcrawler, you know, popping in and out. That's the intangible asset. The intangible asset is not the physical sculpture itself, but the right to reproduce the sculpture. So I hope, Leander, that makes sense.
Also, just to add as well, if they have a creative design to brand their film festival, that will also be subject to copyright as well.
Super happy you brought up the brand as well there, Ms. Baiju, because if you branded your film festival with some sort of distinctive brand,
Yes.
I mean, if you call it film festival, then that's not very distinctive. But if you have some brilliant brand, you call it, also I would say Papayo Film Festival. You never know, some entertainment for Papayo Film Festival, you might have a nice brand that you want to protect, and they are writing unregistered trademarks, but you might want to register the trademark. So it just depends on the circumstances. As a lawyer, it depends. Any other questions while we wrap up? We're here. Feel free to reach out to us. I believe
trademarks of the brand, right? So I have a television series that I would like to trademark. I'm sorry, I wasn't here at the beginning. I don't know if you said it. Do I just go to the registrar's office and trademark my television series? Oh, to you all?
Yes, so we register brands.
Okay.
So while there is no copyright registry in Trinidad and Tobago, there is a trademark registry, because trademarks are registrable as what we call industrial property. That was at the start. So I'm not gonna bore you with all those details. Come to us and we register your brand once distinctive and once it's registrable. Yeah. Ms. Baiju just put her email address there. Ms. Mohammed just put her email address there. You can reach out to us. Ms. Prasad just put up some information on trademarks that might be helpful. This is all available to you. The office is available to lend any assistance where required. So I see Leslie was having a little walk around just now.
Yes, I have an interview in the next few. But I do want to say thank you so much to the Deputy Controller, Kavis Sital from IPO, and our facilitators, Steffi Mohammed and Anelia Beju. Please, our film-friendly individuals, once you're creating content, reach out to IPO. They do amazing work. They are very supportive in terms of giving us information regarding trademark as well as copyright. And you'll get this for free 99. So let's really utilize it and make it make sense, as we say. So thank you all so much for joining us on our third Lunch and Learn. Thank you so much again to the IPO Intellectual Property Office, and we will see you all next week, Friday.
Having us.
Thank you for having us. Bye.